All right, welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm Cullen Gilchrist, founder and CEO of Union Kitchen. I'm here with Daniel Diaz, the founder and CEO of Social Bulldog. Part three, we spoke about getting started with social media marketing and then thinking about paid ads and how to manage that. Here, part three, we want to talk about the sales funnel. What's success? So thanks for joining for this. I'm excited about chatting about this.
Cool, thank you.
So, I guess just let's keep it simple. What's a sales funnel? How would you describe that?
Yeah, so you have the traditional sales funnel, which is trying to track a user's journey from discovering your brand through to becoming a consumer. And it's normally the inverted triangle with three sections almost. And the idea, at least historically, a while back, at least not the way I look at it, but the way it's looked at is to move someone down this funnel.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that you really have to have the flexibility to be able to allocate budget to these different sections. And as we spoke in previous parts, you don't normally have that luxury when you're starting out. You're looking at money in, money out.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can drive some level of brand awareness or engagement with your brand, get them to understand who your brand is and move them down the funnel into the middle where they are considering said brand to becoming a consumer is a little bit dated almost. Especially with what I believe now is the power of these algorithms. Again, simple comes up again in my mind when I think about this.
Yeah.
And looking at this more holistically comes to mind. Your DR ads are driving a little bit of everything when you're running media, and we spoke about this in the previous section. When I run media, I have 99% of my impressions that aren't engaged with.
Exactly.
They are driving some level of brand awareness, and I think collapsing this funnel into a more kind of pie to think about it in a slightly different way is I can achieve the bottom of the funnel without having to first engage a consumer with any kind of level of brand awareness. And that's really, again, a function of the power of these algorithms. If you set your targets right, that we spoke about in the previous section, and you test things appropriately, you can figure out how to collapse this funnel to drive awareness and purchase event very, very quickly.
All at once is kind of the idea.
You don't really have to break this down the way we once used to.
Yeah, I guess traditionally you're going to talk about kind of those different levels, right?
Exactly.
And those are, it's awareness, and then it's, being pitched an idea, and then it's purchase. Is that okay? And you have to put money.
Different variations of that. Yeah, money, and also marketers like to have different campaigns for each section.
Sure.
So my brand ads are going to be very different than the bottom of the funnel, which is like, retargeting. They already know who we are. They've been to our site. They've explored our products. Now it's like, how do I get them across the line? And the idea is you have very distinct ads for these different sections and different people. The challenge with that, again, is investment. You need to have the level of investment to actually make it meaningful. And I would argue, again, with the algorithms being so much stronger than they were even 5 years ago, it's not required as much, and you don't have to have that luxury of these massive budgets for each section.
Well, when I love this, like we have this continuing theme of just like, okay, how do we be simple?
Yes.
Right, and so how can you, with the resources you do have, with the investment you're willing to make, able to make, start driving results? And so if you can do kind of awareness and purchase and driving that with your campaigns solely, that's going to make a lot more sense. It's going to be simpler, potentially a lot more impactful. And, you're just cutting through all that extra stuff.
Yeah.
And we're talking about food CPG.
Right.
Right? Like, awareness is tasting it.
Yes.
And if you're doing online, well, that means they got to buy it.
Yep. And on that same point, consumers nowadays are so much more informed than they've ever been.
Yeah.
That there's this idea that you're marketing to someone that doesn't have much knowledge about what you're selling, which nowadays is very rare to have a product that is so unintuitive that you have to explain it, right? Especially in our space here with CPG. To your point, you have to try these things. So there's very few factors for someone buying it. It's normally going to be price and the type of product.
Yeah.
Whether or not it resonates with them.
Well, I think it's important too. We talk about this like when people are just thinking about designing and really preparing to go to market their product. If people don't get it, you're going to have a really hard time getting them to buy it, right? I mean, you have to meet people where they are to some degree. We always talk about, this Venn diagram of make something that the world wants, right? So they've got this circle of all the things the world wants. But the other circle of the Venn diagram is things that you like, things you're passionate about, things you care about. And so what you want to make is the thing right there where the circles intersect, and maybe that's kombucha.
Yeah.
And maybe that's chips.
Yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be something you hate, and it shouldn't be something bizarrely esoteric that like only you care about because you went on like a study abroad when you were 17 and you found this like bizarro, dried meat stick.
Right.
So yeah, finding those things and then using that to really compress your sales funnel into this point of action that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do love that. So, we talked a little bit before about kind of KPIs, and you talked a little bit about the buyer's journey. As people are thinking about this in your compressed version, are there steps to their journey, and are there metrics you're thinking about that like really fit in that people should be thinking about?
Absolutely. I can't stress enough. They are interlinked and they work as a unit. This idea that you can look at a certain part of your funnel that is weak and solely move that metric up is not what we've seen happen. A great example is, so if I break down the funnel that I look at, which is the user journey more so, is what's my CPM, so my cost of serving impressions, which is cost per thousand. What's my action rate, so my click-through rate. How many of these users that are seeing an ad click it?
Yeah, actually engage with the material.
Right, and then it goes on to the site, which is, there's two parts to this. One is, the first two are CPM and CTR. How efficient am I at serving ads, and how many of these people are clicking it? And those two things are so extremely correlated, it's staggering.
Really?
So very much oftentimes you'll have a baseline CPM. Obviously we manage many accounts, so we have a good holistic view of what a good CPM should be. But you can't look at anything in a silo. Simply because my CPM is high doesn't mean we have to figure out how to lower it.
Yeah.
Because the other metrics along the funnel matter extremely. Your CPM could generally be high because your product is a great fit for these consumers that are very valuable to other people. Therefore, there's a lot of people are bidding on these kind of users. But if it still works out to hit your ROAS numbers and your growth numbers, it shouldn't be a cause for alarm.
Yeah.
Likewise, your CTR. Just because my CTR is low doesn't mean it's bad. And that's something that is very hard concept for people to understand. CTR is very often much associated with the CPM and also the type of creative, especially when I'm talking about Facebook. A static image will generally have a much lower CPM and a much lower CTR.
And those are good?
Not necessarily, because it's a combination of those two things. Whereas a video will generally have a much higher CPM and a much higher CTR.
So higher cost, but
higher
better results.
Exactly, higher engagement. Because the results, again, are ultimately the sales.
Okay.
And that is more determined about our site experience and the type of consumers we're driving there. So again, the CPM and CTR are very, very correlated. And you can't, again, if I'm running a static image and I have like an $8 CPM, which is really, really healthy on Facebook right now. If I have an $8 CPM, but a 0.3 click-through rate, which is pretty bad, you can't be like, the natural thing to do is like, I need to improve that CTR because my CPM is awesome. Yeah. If only I could triple my CTR, I'm now tripling my growth. If only it was that simple, right? Generally speaking, they're going to be somewhat correlated. So again, more holistically and more simple looking is these work together. So you have those two that kind of are an indicator of how your ads are performing on platform, and then everything becomes on site. After
so just to kind of recap and keep me moving here. So the steps so far are impression. Someone has to see it. The next one is they have to click something.
Yep.
That brings them on site.
On site.
To maybe your Shopify or to another platform.
Yes, exactly. And there is a metric here that I think is undervalued, which is your click to landing page views. And again, I'm talking about Facebook here predominantly.
Sure.
This metric is how many of these people actually loaded the page that you're sending them to.
After they clicked.
Exactly.
Because there's a percentage that click but then don't load the page.
Yes, exactly.
That's fascinating.
And that's a great indicator of your landing page optimization and your site speed in general. Most of our accounts, we leverage existing pages from their website, be it the homepage, fairly rare, or be it a catalog page or a product page. They're generally what we leverage. Very few times do we actually build specific landing pages, which is very, very common. And there's a whole industry of building and testing landing pages. We found that our website, if it's good, will normally do the job very well.
Use it.
Exactly.
But then that goes back to our basics we talked about as well. In part one, start with your basics.
Yep.
You got to have a solid website. It doesn't have to be crazy, but it's got to be there.
Right.
It's got to work. It has to load, and it must have pages that have relevancy to what you're selling.
Exactly. And again, keeps coming up, simplicity.
Yes.
Too often times we have our websites that have too much information. I can't stress this enough. Information overload is a massive thing in the consumer journey. I think having a simple product description and benefits and a simple pricing structure, which is another massive topic, is how you're pricing your product. In CPG, it's fairly straightforward because you're generally buying a number of units and it's a simple one-time transaction. Having that whole flow be simple to understand is so important for the consumer to be able to complete that process quickly. Because after they click on your ad, and we're now talking about site performance and that part of the funnel, it's really all about speed. It's how simple and how quickly can this consumer buy. Because once they've clicked the product, they want to buy it. Let them buy it. So many times you see this complicated flow, explaining everything, this long process to check out. You need to cut that down as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. Are you dissuading them?
Exactly. And we have a very general rule of thumb. 4 clicks would be ideal for me. If the user can land on site and within 4 clicks be done, that is like almost a gold standard for us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great metric. I wonder how many folks pass that test.
Yeah, I mean, with the checkout flow, it becomes challenging because checkout flows can be rather lengthy.
Yeah. And saved credit cards.
Exactly. I mean, we'll talk about this now in the flow. So once they land on site, the landing page view rate is really what determines whether or not your landing page is working as you should be. A good number in that space is 80 to 90% of the people that click should be loading the page. If it's much lower than that, and we have had instances when we take an account and it's like 30%.
Oh man.
There's some work to be done there on what landing page we're using because it's killing your entire flow, right? We're
crazy.
Driving 1,000 people to site and only 300 are able to load it. That's bananas, right?
And you're probably really proud because you think you have an awesome website.
Exactly.
It's got videos and this or that. There's like a video game on it or something.
Right.
And no one gets to it.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
And mobile first, which is really important.
Yes.
Like most of the traffic from paid ads and in general nowadays, but I think like 90% or so of our traffic nowadays from Facebook is mobile.
90.
So you have to make sure it works on mobile, it looks good on mobile, it loads on mobile.
Yeah.
And that's still almost an oversight nowadays, even though it's the way that...
Crazy.
I mean, the shift was quick, to be fair. But mobile first. And then from landing page views, you have, your add to cart. There's a lot of events. I like to simplify it again. I normally look at add to carts and purchases. You can add in more events, like an initiate checkout. So obviously it depends on how complicated your flow is. If you're a clothing brand with many, many SKUs, you might want the initiate checkout because there's a lot of browsing that happens. I might add this skirt to cart and then go back to look at a sweater and, but with CPG, you probably don't need the initiate checkout. It's great to have, but I really look at add to cart and then purchase rate. Oh. And then you've got a good indication of, okay, the consumer landed on website and the loading page time was good. 80% of people that clicked it loaded it. Now, my add to cart rate is a great indication of your pricing more often than not. Because your ad normally describes your product and the value props. We rarely identify the price point because obviously you have many price points depending on how many units they want to buy, yada, yada, yada.
Well, and if you're a startup, CPG food or beverage company, you're probably not selling the price. You're selling that this is an awesome product.
Exactly.
And it's something you need to try.
So your add to cart is your first indication of your market fit. Am I overpriced, or what else could be the deciding factor of them not adding to cart? Because add to cart rate should be fairly high. Okay. This one's really hard to give a ballpark.
Okay, yeah, like 30, that was my question.
Yeah, maybe like 30% is healthy.
Okay. Cool.
So like a third of people that see that product should add it to cart, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
And then obviously from add to cart to purchase is the biggest area of optimization because that's your checkout flow.
And that's just getting down to those four total clicks.
That's actually from clicking the ad. So once they're on site, add to cart is 1, and then you've basically got 3 clicks. Can they check out with 3 more clicks? And that really comes down to more tech than anything. So payment integration is super important. So do you have, and of course some of these have some financial barriers because you've got to pay to have them installed, but like Google Pay, Apple Pay, PayPal, those 3 are really almost a must nowadays.
You gotta have them.
Yeah, because the moment someone hits add to cart and they see they've got to fill out the whole form, or even worse, create an account to buy from you, you're done. You've lost that consumer.
Absolutely.
Especially nowadays. So those 3 things are really critical. Having payment options on the checkout flow that automate the whole gathering of information, and that also, we spoke about this in part 1, that the consumer already trusts. I have my information saved on Google Pay because I trust Google Pay. And my transactions going through Google Pay, sure, I'm going to hit this one button and be done. That part is super important, which actually almost goes back to our step 1 of what you need to get started. Checkout flow.
Yeah.
Probably should look at very, very early on.
Get your basics.
Yeah.
Get it right. So then when you're putting this money, you're putting this investment, that's not your problem.
Exactly. That's the last thing you want to do is find out that your checkout flow is not very strong when you already put in money towards paid ads. You could have known this before, right? And payment options is a big one. That's one area of where I would recommend some time and investment to be put in, because it's becoming more and more important. And obviously, I hate to be anecdotal, but myself, if they don't have GPay or Apple Pay, I'm almost not checking out.
Yeah, totally.
It's really, nowadays, our time is just, I guess, so much more valuable than it used to be. We are so fickle. Yeah. Like, I want to buy this product.
We could be back on Facebook scrolling through.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't have time for this crap.
Yeah, seriously. I want to buy the product. Like, I 100% want to buy that product when I click it. I get to checkout and there's no GPay. I don't want it anymore. It's crazy. It's that fickle. Super important is the checkout flow.
Absolutely. Now, this is a little, a bit of field, but we talked about setting up our websites, right? And we're talking about social media and driving traffic to our websites, right?
Yeah.
Is that where you want to drive your traffic? Do you want to go to kind of like your owned property of, your unionkitchen.com, yourproduct.com, or do you want to send it to other places like an Amazon?
Super great question. So the challenge with Amazon is that it's what we would refer to as a walled garden. They don't allow any sort of tracking to happen.
Yeah.
So sending them to Amazon, you have the challenge that the moment they get to your Amazon store, you have no way to know who's taken what action. Mm-hmm. So that's probably not a great way. The other option is what you see often is some other sort of publication or article or affiliate that talks about your brand. You still have a similar issue there. You lose tracking. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, as again, talking about simplicity and the 4-click rule, that's an extra click that probably doesn't need to happen. If your website is strong and your product offering is strong, you don't need that extra step. There's places to use it, but not from your own paid advertising.
Yeah.
They should be used for the appropriate thing. It's fascinating you bring up Amazon as well, because one super important thing to do, and it comes down to checkout and shipping. If you haven't got that down, we see a massive dynamic where the consumer will add to cart, see the checkout flow, and go and check Amazon. Mm-hmm. So very often when you start running paid media, if you do have a strong Amazon presence, which can be the case, and it has been the case, you need to keep an eye on your Amazon revenue. Because oftentimes you'll see Facebook is driving Amazon revenue. And that's very...
Even though you're trying to send to the website, they're flipping around because of the challenges around how shipping works.
Well, and it also goes back to the ease of completing said checkout. They know on Amazon, it's literally, now it's literally one button. You buy now, you swipe that buy now, and everything's done for you. All your information, your credit card, your shipping's done. And it just talks to the power of that checkout flow that Amazon have created. So definitely that's a great point you bring up. Keep an eye on Amazon revenue when you start running paid media on Facebook for your website, because there will be a bleed over where consumers go and check Amazon and buy your product there instead. And that obviously becomes challenging measurement more than anything, because that's still good for you. Yeah. You're still driving revenue, probably not as profitably if you did it yourself, but it's still good for you overall. So keep an eye on that.
But harder to track, and you're maybe giving away some points.
Exactly.
That is fascinating. So, I mean, again, just like we got to build our base, right? Get your basics in place, get your website, build your flow right, get your social media up. When that's all there and you feel comfortable with it, you have a product, run your ads, and understand, as you're running your ads, what are the different steps in this in the buyer's journey, right? Like, okay, like we talked about, they're taking those steps. Where are you falling apart?
Exactly. And focus on that. Focus on where you see the biggest drop-off and try and figure out why that might be.
Yeah.
The biggest drop-off will normally be add to cart to checkout to purchase. Yeah. Normally the checkout flow will be the biggest first point. And again, your
I love the 4-click rule.
Yeah, if you can get to the 4-click rule, I'll be fascinated to see how your conversion rates improve.
That's so good.
The other metric to keep an eye on is add to cart to purchase ratio, which again refers to how strong your checkout is. That should be again somewhere in the 30 to 40% range.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range. So a third or so of people that add to cart should be able to check out on your site. If it's lower than that, you probably have something to tweak in your checkout flow.
Yeah, too many questions. Yep. Set up an account. I don't want to set up an account.
Right.
It is fascinating how you're just, at each step, you're losing people.
Yes.
Right? And, as you add more steps, you're just naturally losing it. I mean, it's like a transfer of electricity, like the more steps, you lose what percentage at each step, and limit those steps.
Absolutely.
Make them as efficient as possible, like have a website that actually loads quickly, is mobile optimized.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating stuff. So we talked about some of the KPIs. We talked about the steps in that buyer's journey. And really, what I loved was just compressing the sales funnel so that you're kind of doing it all at once because you set a strong baseline. People understand your product because they already want it.
Right.
And you're just bringing it to them.
Yep.
Boom, here we are, 4 clicks, and we're at your door.
Yep.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I think that's a great way for us to think about sales funnel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to come back and talk a little bit about optimizing our product, and what will be really fun is also thinking about creative strategy. I know, a lot of people enjoy that, and some people are terrified. But cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.